Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Natasha Kirchak.
And I'm Aaron Porras. Coming up in today's newscast, rockets in the south derail a Netanyahu campaign rally.
The Prime Minister announces plans to annex portions of the Jordan Valley.
And Israeli researchers show how new species of sharks are making Israel's coasts their home.
Well, to begin, 3 rockets have just been fired at southern Israel from the Gaza Strip, the second such attack in 2 days.
Yeah, and while 2 of the 3 projectiles appear to have fallen in open fields, the third has caused light damages to a home in Chof Ashkelon. The IDF, in response, attacked 2 Hamas observation points in the northern Gaza Strip.
Then as for the previous attack, with elections now just 6 days away, the campaign trail in Israel is bustling.
But Prime Minister Netanyahu is getting even less chance to rest as rockets fired from the Gaza Strip last night interrupt his latest rally. Take a look. At least 2 rockets set off emergency sirens above Ashdod and nearby Ashkelon on Tuesday, sending hundreds for cover. And 1 woman in Ashdod has received treatment for anxiety after failing to reach a shelter. But the Iron Dome defense system was engaged and no other injuries or damages have been reported.
In spite of the rockets interrupting his speech right at the start, video of the scene shows Netanyahu calmly telling the crowd that we have a code red warning, leave quietly, before being swept away himself by a security detail.
And similarly, Blue and White's MK Gabi Ashkenazi cut his own campaign rally short due to the rockets in Ashkelon. Party leader Benny Gantz, though, took pride in how Ashkenazi apparently stuck around on stage for as long as possible, while Netanyahu, on the other hand, returned to deliver his address about 20 minutes after the rockets subsided.
Well, under Prime Minister and Defense Minister Netanyahu's orders, the Israeli Air Force has retaliated with airstrikes against 15 Hamas targets in the Strip. Targeted sites include a weapons manufacturing plant, a naval compound, and a terror tunnel, according to the IDF. Now, the army is reiterating that it will continue to oppose attempts to harm Israelis and considers the Hamas terror organization responsible for what happens in and out of the Gaza Strip.
Now, in related news, the world is reeling from Prime Minister Netanyahu's latest campaign promise, as he now vows to officially annex Jewish parts of the West Bank if re-elected. And speaking from a special press conference in Ramat Gan, he says that he'd start with the Jordan Valley.
היום אני מודיע על כוונתי להחיל עם הקמת הממשלה הבאה את הריבונות הישראלית על בקעת הירדן וצפון ים המלח.
The Prime Minister then goes on to call on the public to approve of this mandate, as it would allegedly, quote, ensure that Judea and Samaria will never become like Gaza. And the areas Netanyahu is referring to for now are mostly under Israeli control already. But if Netanyahu were to follow through, this would be the first West Bank annexation in decades. Meanwhile, the question of whether or not this vow is just another empty political promise has arisen. And Netanyahu indicates that, quote, out of respect for President Trump, he would wait to apply sovereignty at least until after the U.S. peace plan is released. That said, though, Israeli officials did inform the White House in advance of Netanyahu's speech, and the White House is seemingly indifferent. In fact, in a statement in response, Washington says that there is no change in the United States' policy at this time. And another source says that the U.S. does not believe annexation precludes the possibility of a political settlement in the future when speaking to the Times of Israel. Many in the international community, however, are of course outraged at the thought. PA Prime Minister Mohammed Shtaya, for one, called Netanyahu the chief destroyer of the peace process, while other Palestinians called Netanyahu's statement a declaration of war. And then the UN also put out a statement warning that the move would have no internationally legal effect.
The Secretary General's position has always been clear and consistent. Unilateral actions are not helpful in the peace process. Our position today is unchanged and is reflected in relevant UN resolutions. Any Israeli decision to impose its laws, jurisdiction, and administration in the occupied West Bank is without any international legal effect. I think such a prospect would be devastating to the potential of reviving negotiations, regional peace, and the very essence of a two-state solution.
Well, now joining us in the studio for further discussion on Netanyahu's latest campaign promise of annexing parts of the West Bank, please welcome Eli Chazan, the Foreign Affairs Director for the Likud party. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, let's just first discuss this declaration. I mean, what is so dramatic about it? Aren't these things that Netanyahu has said before in the past?
Yeah, he said that before the last campaign, but this time this is something which is real. I mean, if you saw in the video, he showed the map and where exactly is going to be. And this time it's for real. So I was asked by friends, Eli, why now? What takes him so many years? So the answer is the timing. I mean, under Obama, of course, we could not do it, not to mention the previous administration. Now, this is a good time in order to do it. This is what we wanted to do it for so many years, and this is a good chance.
When you say now, though, I mean, what does that mean? If he were to be re-elected, then
exactly.
How quickly would that happen?
It depends on the number of the seats. If the right bloc will get 61, it will be much easier to do it because there is a consensus among the right bloc in Israel about annexation of the Jordan Valley. If we will be depend on some other leftists from the coalition, so I guess it will be almost impossible. I want to remind to the viewers one thing. There is even a kind of an agreement inside the left wing in Israel about the Jordan Valley. Not about unilateral annexation, but with agreement with the Palestinians. In any case, Jordan Valley, it seems to me, is a consensus, and of course we will do it.
Well, a lot of it is, as we know, under Israeli control, a lot of the parts that he wants to annex, but we do know that there's still a lot more to negotiate with that respect. But I want to move a little bit to the south now with respect to the rockets that just occurred last night at the campaign rally.
And also today.
And also today, it's right. A lot of critics in the opposition have said that Netanyahu is too weak on Hamas, that he's just maintaining a status quo while Hamas is continuing to breach and do whatever it wants, and that last night was a good example of that. How would you respond to that?
They do not understand anything. And by the way, it's so funny because Gantz and Lapid, they led the same policy of Netanyahu, and they know exactly why when they were part of Benny Gantz as chief of staff and Lapid were in the government. They would prefer, because of being populist, the fact that we don't want to go into a conflict in Gaza. It would serve the interest of Iran. Hamas is a proxy of Iran. They're trying to attract us to a conflict in Gaza and with Hezbollah in Lebanon and lead us into a situation that we are not focusing in Iran. We will not let it happen, and they can say whatever they want. Gantz and Lapid and some others, they've already been there. I mean, take for instance Ashkenazi, he was chief of staff for so many years and he conducted the same policy. So what's the difference? I know what's the difference, by the way. He's in the opposition, and he would prefer to say something which is populism.
So what maybe would be a better kind of policy with respect to Gaza, though? Because the truth of the matter is that Hamas is attacking regularly, and a lot of people say that more can be done.
More pressure on Hamas. I truly believe on a different way, in the sense that you need to deal with the leaders, not with the population. I mean, to put a pressure on the leaders of Hamas. This is the only way, but I want to emphasize one more thing. We will not make the same mistake that we did in 1982 in Lebanon, in the first Lebanese war. We are not going to go into Gaza, take down Hamas, and then Abu Mazen will be in power. We are not the servants of Abu Mazen.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Chazan, thank you.
Well, it's been 18 years since the tragedy of 9/11, where the Twin Towers in New York City were struck down during a terror attack. Israel is one of 3 countries outside of the U.S., including Italy and England, that have monuments in honor of the event. In fact, Israel's steel structure in Jerusalem is partially made out of metal from the towers found at Ground Zero.
Yeah, but the Holy Land is doing a lot more than just erecting a statue. In fact, there is a handful of ways that Israelis commemorate the tragedy in Israel. But first, let's take another look at what happened on that tragic day.
And now here with more is ILTV correspondent Shana Fold. Thanks for joining us, Shana.
Absolutely. It's so hard to look at some of that footage for me sometimes. I get emotional every year on this day. But what you said is actually true. There are more things that are going on in Israel than just having the statue to commemorate 9/11. And one thing that Jerusalem does every year is they do 2 beams of blue light that go up to symbolize the Twin Towers, which is something that New York City does as well. And in addition to that, there's actually something very cool happening. There are about 49 members of the NYPD and other police efforts around the U.S. that are coming to Israel, and they're doing a 9-day tour in which they're talking with Israeli authorities about security. They're at the border of Gaza, they're in the north, and they're here sort of in honor of 9/11 to talk about what more security efforts that they can do to make people safer. And 35 out of those people are actually having their first time in Israel, so I think that's special.
But there's also another part of this tour as well, right?
Yes, so there's this motorcycle tour that happens, and it's actually been happening since 1997. The people who first founded it, the idea was to just honor fallen officers. But after 9/11, it took on a greater meaning, and people started to do it all over the world. And 2 of those places that caught my eye were Australia and India.
Interesting.
In the United States, actually, there are people who take motorcycles from New York City all the way down to Washington, D.C. in honor of it. And that same thing is happening here.
So this is in commemoration of the lost lives during 9/11. Interesting.
Yes.
I didn't know this. I had never heard of this before.
All right, well, I know, because you mentioned earlier, like myself, everybody remembers pretty much where they were the moment that the towers fell, that the news started blaring. But, what else is going on in terms of commemorations and things like that?
Well, in New York State, something new happened, which I actually think is interesting. It's not even the status quo that all schools are having a moment of silence for 9/11. I assume that most principals choose to, but now principals in New York State are mandated to actually have a moment of silence. That was by Governor Cuomo, and he did that because he said some of the New York public school students weren't alive. They don't know what happened, and he wants to make sure that everybody remembers.
Well, it's just so crazy. I mean, both of us were in New York City when the towers were hit. So that's something when you're a kid that you don't forget, obviously. Very shocking. I mean, I'm sure you remember what it was like to have your mom and come pick you up from school on that day. I still do. And it's just crazy to think that there's now a generation of young people who...
For me, on the other hand, I remember, they announced it in school. Everybody just stopped doing what they were doing and ran to the TVs to watch. School was canceled.
Well, it's crazy because in Israel as well, Israelis say the same thing. They remember exactly when they saw the news of this terror attack happening in New York City because, my husband says, for example, that was something that happens here, but not something that he had ever seen in America.
That was really, that gives me chills. It really is horrible news.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us, Shana.
No problem.
Moving on, after a year and a half in the post, United States National Security Advisor John Bolton has resigned. Bolton has been a staunch supporter of Israel, and his resignation makes him the 3rd National Security Advisor to come and go under President Donald Trump. Deputy National Security Advisor Charles Kupperman has been tapped as Bolton's replacement. President Trump broke the news on Twitter in classic Trump style, writing that he informed Bolton on Monday night that his services were no longer needed. He also tweets that he and others in the administration disagreed strongly with many of Bolton's suggestions. And it's known that, in fact, there have been serious disagreements on what to do about Iran, Afghanistan, North Korea, and elsewhere. For example, Bolton was reportedly upset by Trump's continued call to negotiate with Iranian President Rouhani. Neither Trump nor any other White House officials have named specific conflicts, though. In addition to the confusion over the reasons for Bolton's exit, there are also questions about who initiated the resignation in the first place. Trump indicates that Bolton was fired, while Bolton responds on Twitter that he had already offered to quit anyway. He says he offered to resign, but then Trump said, "Let's talk about it tomorrow," just hours before announcing the resignation anyway. And whatever the case, the question now is what will happen next with Trump's security policies abroad. Bolton is seen as a hawk in Washington and a staunch supporter of Israel amidst the conflicts in the Middle East. He's also seen as a harsh critic of Iran and its malign activities. So Iranian officials, for one, have already expressed their contentment, saying that hopefully this will enable American policymakers to look at Iran in a less biased manner. Well, moving on, almost 1 out of every 4 students have reported being bullied in the United States, and about 27% of people between the ages of 12 to 17 say they've been bullied online. Joining us to discuss why these statistics just don't seem to be changing is Chen Krupnik from the Beyachad Foundation. All right, thank you so much for joining us. And first, could you just tell us quickly a little bit about what your organization does?
It's a nonprofit organization that helps inclusion. We empower inclusion because all children are special today. There's no normative, if you call it like that. So every child needs to be included, and that's what we promote, especially children with special needs that they are, they often statistically they are bullied more, and if they want to be included, and if we want them to be included, we need to act differently than with regular kids.
So how is bullying, if at all, different in Israel than it is maybe in the United States or other parts of the world?
Well, I think that the only difference that I notice being brought up there and also here, and being in both schools, that we're a military country, so you have to be very strong. And what are you going to do in the army? And why are you a crybaby? And you're going to be a soldier. And you say it mostly to boys, but also to girls. And you have to be very, very strong. And then when you bully someone, when somebody is like a crybaby or more sensitive, maybe, then it seems weird because we're supposed to be very, very strong and very, very tough.
And that's what
so I guess that's the only difference that I can see.
It seems like a toxic masculinity sort of thing.
But
we're a very military country. So we always, when I have a boy and I tell him all the time, what are you going to cry in the army? What are you going to sleep in the army? It's what you say.
Yes.
Right. Well, I mean, and that's where parents come into the picture here, because, I mean, obviously bullying is something that happens in school, but how do you deal with it outside of the schoolroom?
Well, most of the parents are very occupied and worried that their kids are going to be bullied, but they don't think about their kids being the one bullying. And they're always asking, but most of the parents I see, they're on their smartphones and in jobs, and nobody is really paying attention to the kids after school. Yeah, 3 or 4 hours with them, you need to sit with them, to ask them, to see if something's going wrong, if something's going on with them, and you should pay attention and see who their friends are, if they have friends, what are they doing, who are they doing it with, and also pay attention if they're abusing someone else or being abused. It's both of them.
It goes
you have
both
to
ways.
both ways, and most parents don't even look at that. It's okay, my kid is strong.
My kid's perfect.
He'll manage. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.
And thank you so much. Now, the average American produces over 2,000 pounds of trash each year. That is a metric ton. And now an Israeli startup is now piloting a new waste conversion program in the United States to help combat the issue.
Now, UBQ Materials is on a mission to convert unsorted household trash like dirty diapers or yogurt containers into recyclable thermoplastic substitutes. In other words, plastics that can be molded into different shapes depending on how hot or cold it gets.
Absolutely. So how is it done? Well, ideally, the garbage is picked up long before it ever hits the landfill, and from there, it's converted into a homogeneous bioplastic. In fact, CEO Jack Biggio calls the business a, quote, plastic replacement company, and a pilot is already underway at the Central Virginia Waste Management Authority. To start, the local authority has placed an order for 2,000 recycling bins made from the UBQ materials.
And if that's not impressive enough, the company says the converted waste is fully recyclable again and can be a great substitute in the construction industry. Now, the materials are good for making bricks, pavement, and thousands of other products. Plus, making the product itself doesn't actually produce any emissions, use water, or leave behind waste. So that saves 11.7 kilograms of carbon dioxide or carbon dioxide-like emissions per kilogram of these new materials.
And today in Israel, a minimum of 7,000 tons of garbage is already being converted at a plant in Kibbutz Tze'elin in the south. And here's another fun fact. UBQ Materials was founded in 2012 by Rabbi Yehuda Pearl. And if you don't recognize that name, then you might recognize his brand. He's also the founder of Sabra, the global provider of hummus and other salad dips.
You love Sabra.
I do love Sabra. It's very delicious. All right, now Shark Week came and went in July, but researchers say that Israel is currently having a bit of its own shark moment.
That's right, Aaron. All of us in the newsroom were very surprised to find that there are new shark species that are finding their way to the Mediterranean Sea during wintertime. The sandbar and dusky sharks are the main species that are coming to Israel. And marine biologists from Haifa University who are observing say they're especially attracted to the water outside of the Hadera power plant. Why, you ask? Well, it's because the facility makes those waters warm. Aaron, you want to join them for a swim?
Kind of, but no thank you. And so the good news is that the marine biologists are calling this a, quote, rare phenomenon, and they say that it's particularly unusual because of the Mediterranean Sea is one of the most nutrient-deficient bodies of water. Nevertheless, sharks are leaving their cold water environments, and they're developing populations here.
Leaving home and moving to Israel. It seems like everyone's
They're
doing
making
it.
Aliyah.
Yeah, especially in ILTV. Well, 50 sharks to be exact. The university has put tags on them and found that they're coming back every year when it starts to get cold outside.
It sounds like a good plan to me. And finally, experts say that there's one other reason that Israel is a good spot for the sharks. Shark meat is not kosher. So because the fish are not being hunted for food, they keep coming back for the good treatment.
Well, on a more serious note, I would like to say we need to change how we view the big old fish. They've gotten a bad rap as these bloodthirsty man-eaters. And like you said, they'd rather stay away from us. After all, we're eating them. Humans are eating them. Up to 73 million sharks are traded in fish markets around the world. We're hunting them. It's not the other way around. So be nice to the sharks.
But still, I'm not going to go swim with them anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think you will. Not your kind of thing. Okay, so for those of you excited about the next installment in the Star Wars saga, you might not have to wait all the way until December to geek out, because there's now an outpost of the Stormtroopers 501st Legion right here in Israel.
Oh, yeah, and I am very excited and here with the story. We are, of course, joined by Nittany Manson from ILTV. Nittany, thank you so much for being with here on this special subject.
What is
this breaking news?
Yeah, breaking news. Honestly, what is the 501st Legion?
The 501st Legion, which is also known as Vader's Fist, is one of the largest fandom groups in the world. They were founded back in 1997.
Okay.
And it's basically people who dress up as Star Wars characters and make people happy.
Are you part of the 501st
No, but
Legion?
I'm
You're working on it.
I'm auditioning.
All right, so hold on. So it's in Israel.
Well, now it has just come to Israel. There's actually a guy, Adam Nahum, who he wanted to be part of this group for a very long time. Back in 2015, he found out from his friends in the UK that it exists, and he wanted to not audition, but sign up. He actually applied. You have to apply, and it's a really rigorous process, actually.
way.
You apply, and his costumes weren't up to standard for this group.
Movie accurate only.
Okay,
Movie accurate. The
this
screws on his costume were actually not the right color.
Oh, man.
So he actually had to go back. They told him, he said they were very nice about it, and they told him what he needed to fix. He fixed it. He reapplied, and they did accept him back in August.
Okay, so what do they actually do? Tell us quickly, because we're running out of time. But
So the group actually, they just go out and they do community service. They'll come to events like fun events. If you want like a business event and you want stormtroopers to show up, or if you want them to go to a hospital and make little kids happy, then they'll come do that. They don't take any money. They don't take any money, and they just ask that you give a donation to a special organization. One of them that they do is Make-A-Wish Foundation.
All right, well, I know that this isn't movie accurate, so you have a little bit of work to do on your own costume there. But
I don't know what to say about this one. I'm very happy that the 501st Legion is coming here.
It's happening.
Let's take a look at the weather forecast on that note. All right, tonight should be partly cloudy and warm with a low of 74 or 23 degrees Celsius. And then tomorrow will be partly cloudy again and with a high of 85 or 29 degrees Celsius.
All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.55 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. I'm Aaron Porras.
And I'm Natasha Kirchuk. Thanks so much for watching.